we've got to stop looking at education as like this model of a child's brought into this world as an empty vessel, and all of these teachers swoop in to fill the vessel. And once the child's done, you take a test, and if you pass the test, you have worth as a human. And if you don't, well, go figure it out. You're on
Mm.
your own.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, because everybody that I've ever met has a talent, has a skill, has something amazing about them. And a lot of the time, what's amazing about them is something that education doesn't measure, it
Yeah.
doesn't teach. They had to develop it on their own. And why? Because those things are uncertain. You can't measure vulnerability.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I have been thinking about the music I've been listening to, and I just surprised myself there. I wasn't sure what I was thinking about. But, um, the same 20 years back, the same me, or not the same me, the me wouldn't have been the same about music, right? Because you kind of sold this idea that you really have to find identity through the bands you listen to. And the 18-year-old me was kind of just forming this love affair with heavy metal, Iron Maiden, Metallica, um, maybe even Iron Maiden to a certain extent. But at the same time, my sister at that point was 5 years old, and she was listening to Sting and the Police, U2. So kind of you kind of go through phases, and I really like what was hardcore, like Metallica and Megadeth to a certain extent. But even Iron Maiden, I got an Iron Maiden, then Dream Theater, and now at 41, I'm just like, yeah, I'm listening to Sia featuring Diljit Singh, Hus Hus, and I'm like, yeah, I like it. So I don't know what that means. Is it that you're comfortable with your identity, so the music really doesn't have to define it anymore? Because 2004 or 5, when I was in the US, I was hardcore, like anti-establishment, Coheed and Cambria, the Used, Yellow Card, these boy bands, black nail polish. I didn't paint my nails, fortunately, but I had lip ring, and wearing hoodies made by Volcom, which then you found out is owned by Nike, and you're like, yeah, fuck the establishment. You're like, not so much. Pierced my lip, and 2 days later, a guy's like, hey, buddy, did you get into a fishing accident? And I'm like, yeah, time for the lip ring to come off, because that's a pretty fucking good observation. Um, yeah, it's just identity, right? It's such a big thing that we work on. And as you get more comfortable with all the things that are the facets of your identity, which you're comfortable with, things you've forgiven, things you've forgotten, things you've given up, things you've taken on, you stop looking externally for identity markers, the brands of clothes, the cars you drive, the labels that you flaunt, the food you eat, the things you do for fitness, where you're seen, more importantly, working out and partying and socializing and holidaying and all these things. And you kind of just say, yeah, this is basically what it is, and I'm cool with it, right? And like for something as simple as, for the longest time, I never wore half sleeve shirts because I just felt like it reminded me of an older generation, and like it's like a mustache, half sleeve shirt and chappals, right? It reminds you of like, oh, you become your dad. And then now I'm wearing it. I'm like, yeah, I am a dad. And it's not so much that I've become my own dad. It's just that I'm cool with it, in the sense I still like to dress up. I like to look good in nice clothes, but I'm no longer, are these diesel jeans? Are these Ferragamo shoes, or whatever shoes I would craze over? Like, are these Asic Tigers? Or it, it's more about, do the shoes look good? Are they comfortable? Is the color nice? Is the fit nice? And okay, cool. What brand is it? It kind of, the priority changes. And I think the reason I'm thinking about these things is because and I'm going to say this out to all of you who may be going through your various phases in your journey, right? And I always say on this podcast, I'm not here to preach or to patronize, but it's kind of what I go through. I just put out there, and if you can resonate with it, if some of the stuff you can identify with, or some of the tips can kind of help you kind of say, huh, this might help, or this might send me in that direction, that's the least I can do. And one thing I notice is we have a lot of opportunity today to listen to self-help material in the form of YouTube videos by people like Jay Shetty or Sadhguru, or podcasts like A Diary of a CEO with Simon, I think Simon Bartlett, that's his name, or listening to business advice from, like, say, the likes of Tim Ferriss, or health tips from Andrew Huberman or Ben Greenfield, and all these crazy, crazy, crazy popular podcasts with huge reach and huge following, nutritional podcasts, nutritional blogs, and influencers telling you what you should do, or tips to help your life, or books like, what's her name? Tara Brach, I think she has the Radical Self Acceptance, Radical Self Love. And all these things are some amazing bodies of work, which we each in our own way didn't have access to because of whatever accessibility issues, right? Whether it was not available in a certain format, whether it was too expensive, whether it was just not there in our region. Everything now seems to be at our fingertips. And I think it's a great time for that. But think about this. Some of us, most of us, are experiencing turmoil, and we resort to listening and reading these bits of content for the answers to our problems, solutions to the situations we're in. And we spend hours, sometimes 10 hours a week, sometimes more, 80 hours a month, sometimes more. And yet, how many of us take the time to listen to ourselves? Uh, 80 hours a month, 10% of that 8 hours, can do it. Any of us spend time just sitting with our thoughts, sitting with our breath, sitting with our feelings, with our emotions, with our memories, with our um, state and the consequences of the things we decided to do. Because if you can't look at that as time well spent, then I think we're just looking at the whole equation from the wrong side. And it is hard to even sit for 10 minutes, but we all need even that to be directed and determined by an external factor, which is a guided meditation app. And I'm not saying that these aren't good. I think they're great. They help to get us started. But if we can kind of get to a place where we are looking for so many external things to tell us how to help ourselves, and not starting from the place of sitting with ourselves and asking what we actually want and where we are and what hurts and what doesn't and what feels right and what was wrong and what we could have done and what we can do and how we should do it and how we should go about it and who is important and who is not and what person has hurt you and what person has helped you. I think that is the biggest place. And as you guys know, I kind of end up bitching social media out, and not bitching, but I kind of talk a lot about the negative effects and the side effects and the harm it does have on certain populations, and even on all people, depending on how it's used. But I was just thinking, if you look at your Facebook list or you look at your contact list on the phone and look at technology and what it can do in that way, by having these lists of people who are in your network, LinkedIn, or let's look at friends and acquaintances. And for that, I suppose Facebook is um, the most easily accessible list. And instead of looking at the news feed and getting all tied up in knots about how someone had a better holiday, or someone is more fit, someone's more rich, someone's happier, someone's got a better family, someone's got better looks, instead of that, if you could just go through your friends list in whatever way, and for every name, just leave it at that. Don't go into the profile. Just go name by name. And if you could think of two, three good things about that person. Now, if it's a close friend, the encounters, the memories, the experiences, the traits, because you know the person better. If it's someone not as close to you, then of course the encounters or the deeds that the person did, or the times you did meet, or with someone who's probably not known. In the case of Facebook, sometimes it's just someone you add because it's 3 degrees of separation. If just a thought or two which is good about the person, I just feel it is liberating, because first of all, you can use it as a list of people and an order to go by, as opposed to just think of someone or think of 10 people. This is just there. And if, depending on the length of your list, you can go through 10 people a day and just have a few good thoughts, because it automatically takes away what the algorithm rewards Facebook for, which is the negative thoughts, which is you want to see someone do badly, but you also are jealous of someone doing well. But if you could just use the resources that the Facebook friends list provides to you and have these moments in a day where you go through 10 people, 20 people, whatever gives you, um, whatever time you have for, but also whatever doesn't drain you, and have those moments with that person's name and the association and the memories and the relationship and the things and the experiences that brings in your head positively, I think that will change. And it's something I've been thinking about, will change your thought process and not just run to the first thing, which is a threat that a person brings to your life, or a sense of insecurity, or a sense of lack of self worth or inadequacy. But however that person thinks of you, whether they have a good time with you or bad time with you, or they are no longer your friend, or they might have said something shit about you, irrespective of that, do it for yourself and use it as a kind of opportunity and a moment in your day to kind of just go through these names and think of three, four good things, good experiences, good times, good traits about that person. And trust me, I think it'll change your life. So that's one little thing I wanted to share with you. And let me get on to today's guest, because Josh Meisner is someone who I had a really fun time chatting with, a person who helps train teams in the mobile networking space. He's someone who's taken a good hard look at himself and the world around him, and what is important to him and his family, and what is important to him as his family, with the way he looks at the internet, consumption, attention, and social media again. But in today's chat, Josh and I discussed the things that are important to enjoy this thing we call life through the vessel we have, which is our mind and body. We talk about soft skills, which have been named in an, I think, unfair way. And we talk about life skills. What are the things that help us get through life at different stages and navigate the different phases and make this journey as enjoyable, as, I think, intimate in the ways it needs to be, as fun in the ways it needs to be, and as memorable as we can make it. So I'm sure you will enjoy listening to this conversation. Josh has a lot of wise things and nice stories to share. So enjoy it as much as I did. And thank you, as always, for being a part of the SoapyRao show. And yeah, without further ado, here's my conversation with Josh Meisner. Cheers. Josh, thank you so much
Excellent.
for joining me today on the podcast. It's lovely to have you here.
It's lovely to be here. And that voice, that recording in progress, so aggressive.
Yeah.
Like every time I enter a Zoom class and it says that, I'm like, ah.
I suppose they've been burnt enough because they didn't say it substantially enough, and people are like, I didn't hear it, and I felt violated. My trust felt violated. So now they're like, we said it in the most clear way possible. If you didn't pick it up, then there's something wrong with you.
Whoa, too far Zoom. Now I feel intimidated.
I just told you, like the auto AI which was trying to join us, right? It's almost like this person who's trying to join our date, and they keep coming up to the table, and they're like, can I pull up my chair? And you're like, no. And when I threw it out of the meeting, Zoom's like, are you sure? Should you want us to report this person? I'm like, no, don't report this person. It. Oh, do you think we have this AI fear of AI right now with whatever happened with Sam Altman and him being thrown out and taken back, and because of some fear of a brand new form of AI coming on and being unleashed on humanity. Do you think we're recreating an online world in our own image, or is it slowly slipping away from us, the control?
Wow, what a perfect question I mean, the timing could not be better, honestly. Just last night, I was holding a virtual class, and we were talking specifically about online personas and the persona you present online and how easy it is to manipulate that versus when you do it in a face-to-face
Mm-hmm.
context. I mean, people have been manipulating their persona for as long as humanity's been around. But when you have technology stepping in, making it easier, well, that just changes everything. And so last night, as we were talking about all of this, and we started bringing up issues of AI and where that's taking us, and it reminded me of something that I heard a very, very long time ago. And this was probably around, I want to say 2007. This was like the rise of Twitter. Nobody had heard of Twitter yet. I'm not nobody, but most of my students anyway hadn't heard of Twitter. And I thought I was so technologically savvy because
Mhm.
here I am talking about social media. And um, anyway, ha- one thing that I heard, and I don't even remember where I heard it, but I've been saying it ever since, is that one, we are educating students for jobs that don't exist yet,
Mm,
and we're meant to prepare them for those jobs. And two, nobody knows what the world is going to look like in 5 years' time, in 3 years' time. And yet everybody's trying to predict where it goes. And one of the things that shocked or didn't shock me, but it's inspired me to do a lot of the research and the writing and that I've done and my TED talk and everything is, we're so busy focused on the future and what it can do for us and all the beneficial things that come with these tools. Because I mean, they're pretty amazing. There's no doubt about that. The
yeah.
benefits are astounding, but we're forgetting about right now. We're so focused on the future that we're forgetting to take care of what's happening around us right now. And so one of the alarms that I've been sounding is that we need more balance. We need to make sure that we're taking a moment to appreciate what's happening here and now, and not to be so focused on the future or on technology that we end up missing the beauty of life as it's happening right in front of us.
You know, I, I, I find that a really, really strong and important message. But just for a moment now, I'm going to play devil's advocate here because,
Mhm,
I go back to my schooling days in the 90s, and um, it was, I wouldn't say pre-internet, but it was like the birth of, we had the
mhm.
personal computers and very slow connectivity. And then I kind of, through my years in school and university, I saw especially from an accessibility point of view, I saw it from my mom reading out to me on cassette tapes to then getting um, a digital kind of a software like JAWS to be installed on my computer to the laptop, the portability, and then the smartphone. So that's kind of covering 20 years. Um, but do you think we ever are, digitally or non-digitally, were we ever willing to kind of be in the present? Because I feel while the education system, as you said, that we're we're educating kids and young adults for jobs that don't exist anymore. So while they don't have an idea of the future, they kind of send you into into a bit of a panic about the future, right? They always tell you like, okay, when you're in your fourth or fifth grade, especially here in India, they're like, are you ready for your entrance exams in the 12th, right? Which is when you are prepping for the equivalent of SATs. Or
Yeah, look, I know that you're in first grade now, but have you thought about what you want to be when you graduate?
yeah, have you saved enough to start a family, right? And so they put all these fears and this anticipation of what it's to like going to be like when you grow old, or when you're older than what you are. But yet the system that you're presently in isn't equipped to teach you with the skills you need, because it's not about how much you aced in your algebra or your maths test, but it's the skills and the tools that allow you to adapt with the changing time. So in one way they scare you about the future, but in the other most important way, they don't prepare you for the future.
Mhm. It's a double-edged sword. It really is. And that's why my approach to educating has always been, I mean, I hate using this analogy because it's so overused, but it's true. The whole, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day, teach him to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. I've always kind of taken that approach. And in fact, just today, I was talking with the leaders that I'm working with here in Guatemala, training them. I said, I can teach you how to use everything. It'd take forever, but I think I would rather teach you how to learn, teach you where these tools are, who to talk to, how to talk to them, what you're looking for, and really what I want to focus on is the human element. How are you going to interact with the people that are important around you? Because your job as a leader is to lead people. And so it's not all about teaching the tech stuff. It's more about saying, okay, I need to be able to equip you to where when you enter a situation that I don't know exists yet, that you will have everything that you need to think your way through it, to think critically, to analyze it, to rally people around and say, okay, team, like we need to get this figured out. And
Mm-hmm.
here's how we're going to approach it. You need to be the one who's giving the pep talk, when people are feeling overwhelmed because there's just so much to think about. You're the one that's going to calm them down and to bring some order and some rational thought back into that situation. And so a lot of a lot of students have told me in the past, you're not teaching a communication class, you're not teaching an organizational theory class, you're teaching life skills. I said, yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing because I can teach you the technical part that's going to be obsolete in a year's time anyway. And then
If you're
you're
lucky.
not getting your money's worth. Yeah, if you're lucky. Things are moving so fast that, like, I had a student the other day in a class where I showed a video and it was a very poignant video, powerful. Most of the students are like, "Oh my God, that's really making me think." And this one student actually goes, "How old was that video?" And I stopped for a second. I said, I think it was 3 years old. And he's like, "Yeah, because some of that info is outdated, man." Like,
Yeah.
that's what you took from it?
Yeah.
But
I mean, three
things are
years
moving
is
so
ancient
fast.
history in this generation, right?
Yeah, it is. Like, that's the
Yeah.
oldies right there. But to your question about have people always been distracted, or have they always been kind of thinking about the future? That is an excellent question because what's happened, and I'm trying to give you the Cliff's Notes, the shortened version of this, because I can get excited and I'll start talking forever, but
No, please get
um,
excited because this
throughout,
really interests me, and it's something which I think is essential for people listening in every age group, right? Because it kind of
yeah,
determines where we're going with all this.
yeah, and I've honestly I've talked about this with people of all ages, and everybody takes something from it. So throughout the human history, there's been four, maybe five revolutions in communication. And every single one of those was triggered by some technological leap forward that just radically changed the way that we interact with one another and the way we share information. And so the first one was the written language. So it took us from being this purely oral society that we did everything verbally. You gave somebody your word, shook hands on it. That was that. That was a binding contract. Um, but as soon as writing came into play, like, suddenly what you say isn't just this ethereal thing that disappears as soon as the sound goes away. Now you have it written down and it's there for as long as that thing is written down.
Hmm.
And so that really changed things. That took away the power of somebody's word and it suddenly gave more power to a written contract, or written laws and things like that. But it also allowed people to, like, record history. That's kind of important, and be able to go back and reread things and remember things. So then that was about, depending on where you look in the world, that was anywhere from like 5,000 to 10,000 years ago. I mean, it was all over the place. The next revolution happened around the time of the printing press. So we're talking like, I think it was 12th century Korea, but that it didn't really catch on that well. They were kind of isolated. But the one that really caught on was the one in 15th century Europe, Gutenberg. And that radicalized everything because suddenly you're not just you're not relying on monks with their beautiful calligraphy to copy everything. It's like, okay, here's this document. When can I get it back? Uh, Check back with me in about 5 years' time. Um, all of a sudden, you got this printing press that can just crank out copy after copy, and now you're sharing information. You're increasing literacy rates. You're driving education, and so the distance between the first two revolutions was roughly, I don't know, 4,000 years or so.
Right.
I'm not a mathlete, so I'm doing it in my head. But the next revolution was really a series of smaller revolutions. It happened within the Industrial Revolution. I just said revolution three times in one sentence, and that bothers me. I'm constantly editing in my head, but
Right.
uh, so, so that started in the mid 1800s and went all the way up to, I think the agreed upon end of that one is probably around the invention of um, the transistor, so about early 1970s.
Right.
So over that period, like so many inventions came out.
So it's
And
like
the
almost
reason
five ten
that,
thousand. Then it's like
yeah,
1,500, and now it's like 150. So it's like reduced.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're
it's crazy.
shrinking. And it's because of the efficiency of sharing information and ideas. The better we got at sharing that widely with people, the faster the innovations kept flooding in.
Mm,
And so we paused for a bit from the early 1970s until the early 1990s.
mm.
Roughly a period of 20 years, we paused, we rested, and it's probably one of the more peaceful periods in modern history in
Yeah.
terms of that revolution. But it was when the World Wide Web hit the public and the dot-com boom happened. That was what it was like, just giving this shot of nitrous
Mm,
into everything that we were innovating. And next thing we know, um, what really happened at first, everyone was thinking it's computers that are driving this, and then they said, no, it's more the internet that's driving this. And now that we've had some time to think about it, we're looking back and saying it was neither of those things, but it was both of those things.
mm.
It was the convergence of all of the different kinds of technology that we have. And as we're generating these ideas saying, well, what if we removed a phone from the cord and plugged into the wall and we put it in your pocket? Like, what would that do? Oh, now that we've got this phone, what if we combine that with the internet? What would that do? And so the combination of all of these different technologies has created these new possibilities that make it to where something like Chat GPT becomes a very realistic possibility. And it's no longer thinking about AI like watching Arnold Schwarzenegger in The Terminator,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
more like, it's honestly not as scary as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be all big and like bulky. But Chat GPT isn't nearly as intimidating as Arnold, and he can write a paper for me, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So, I mean, every single time we've had these revolutions, there's been winners and losers.
Yeah.
So the printing press, for example, the winners were, the folks who started making money off of books and education and teaching literacy to people. Of course, Martin Luther was a big winner there because he got his way. And then the losers, of course, like the monks doing that beautiful calligraphy, are sitting back going, bro,
Yeah.
like where'd all the work go? Why am
Trained
I
my
not
entire
getting
life for
paid
this.
anymore?
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
there still calligraphy? Yeah, there's still calligraphy. Steve Jobs even admitted to having studied it in college, and it was one of his biggest inspirations for starting Apple,
Mm,
ironically. But every time that the attention shifts from one thing to another, the folks who lose out are the ones who refuse to adapt. They don't want to change. They want to keep making Bibles out of calligraphy. Good for them. That's great if that's your choice, but you have to be prepared for the big loss that comes with it because people don't want it anymore. They've moved
mm.
on to um, Comic Sans and Times New Roman on a screen rather than the beautiful work you're creating.
This thing you mentioned a few minutes back with the team of leaders you're working with in Guatemala, and also the students you worked with, which were the life skills that they mentioned. So we keep hearing these things in the concepts of life skills, right? But they, I mean, could you possibly be more specific of some of the skills you're talking about. But to start with that, you mentioned how you approached the team of leaders and you said learning, right? I don't want to teach you
Mhm.
what to do, but I want to teach you how to learn. And
Mhm.
I find that um, a very important yet um, something that's looked down upon by a lot of people at a certain after a certain age, because we
Right.
encourage students to learn when you're a student.
Mhm.
But once you're
Right.
no longer a student, you shouldn't show weakness. You shouldn't show that you don't know. And in some way, that defeats the idea of learning, because learning does display vulnerability, does display a lack of not knowing and the willingness to overcome that. But not many people are given an opportunity, and the ones who do have an opportunity feel intimidated because it's like a sign of weakness in a corporate environment, or it's a sign of weakness in a
Mhm.
group, especially today when you have information at your fingertip saying that you don't know, or and learning is not always done through a course or a certification, but it's also done through interaction with other human beings who know more than you. So how does
Mhm.
someone navigate that?
So I would love to answer this question with a story, because I well, this just happened to me with the leaders here that I'm working with,
Mm-hmm.
just within the last few weeks, and it was one of those moments where part of me wishes that somebody had it on video because I would
Mm-hmm.
love to revisit this moment over and over and over and over again. But I mean, I can because it's in my mind. But anyway, so we're nearing the end of this one phase of training, and I've got this group of about 20 or so, and we've been working together for about 4 weeks. And as we're coming to the end, somebody brings up the fact that, oh, Josh is leaving. He's going home for a little while, and then he'll be back for the next phase of training. It's, Thanksgiving and all, and family. So what they started getting a little bit anxious, a little bit nervous because they know that they have to start taking over on their own, like doing things without me. And I mean, they know that I've always got their back. I'm always supporting them from remotely, but it was a little nerve wracking for them. They're uncertain and scared of the future. So I don't know where this came from. I really don't. But my inner Chris Farley playing Matt Foley, the motivational speaker who lives in a van down by the river, he just came out of me, and I went full motivational speaker. And I still don't know why, but it worked. So I said, okay, you guys, I want to talk about something, and I want everyone to pay attention, to really like take this to heart. So I wanted to make sure I had their attention first, because if they're distracted and they only get part of the message, it's not going to be effective. So once I have all their attention and they're committed to it, I said, I want you to think back to your childhood and learning to ride a bike.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's like, okay, okay. I was like, anybody not know how to ride a bike? Did anybody not go through that? Because if not, you won't get this. But nobody had, thankfully. I said, I have 4 kids. They currently range from 16 at the youngest to nearly 30, which really makes me feel old. But all 4 of them I taught to ride a bike, and all 4 of them were very different. It wasn't on purpose necessarily, but with my first kid, almost 31, I did not want to see him fall. I did not want to see him get hurt. I mean, he's my first kid. I'm afraid that if I break him, I'm going to have to send him back. And really didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep him.
Yeah.
And so I was like explaining everything. Okay, so downward force on the pedals, make sure the vector is correct on your handlebars and that your wheels are aligned. Keep pedaling, but lean to one side and the other. You got to keep your balance. I filled his head with enough instructions to build an IKEA bookshelf.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this kid is like, his head is swimming with instructions. And of course, he panicked.
Mm.
He had the hardest time learning to ride a bike because he was just thinking about all of the steps so much. So it wasn't until after he had learned to ride a bike and I had some time to sit and think about it that I'm like, you know, I probably could have done that with a lot less because as I was thinking about my own time riding a bike, nobody taught me. I just did it on my own. Like I figured it out and I fell a lot. But so my next kid, I was like, okay, I'm gonna back off a little. I'm gonna kind of let her take over. Well, she was my first daughter, and like I didn't want to break her either.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, she's so fragile, and of course, she really wasn't. Um, very, very strong kid, but I did it. I found myself doing it again, and sure enough, it pretty much the same thing happened. Very much thinking heavily about it. So there was a gap there between the first two and the last two, a gap of about 7 years or so.
Hmm.
So when my younger of my two daughters was born and she was getting to that age to ride a bike, I thought, all right, um, two strikes. I don't want to get a third, but I don't want to break my kid.
Yeah,
So what I'm going to do is to use less instructions. I'm going to just do everything in my power to hold back and just watch her do it and be there to support her.
right.
So I was, and the fact that I was like a helicopter parent side by side with her the whole time, even though I wasn't giving all the instructions, it was just my presence that made her nervous. And it
Mm.
took forever to learn how to ride a bike. I'm like, I am never going to succeed at this.
Right.
Well, then luckily I had a fourth kid just to teach this kid how to ride a bike, by the way.
Yeah.
As soon as he learned, he was gone. No. um, so I decided with the last one, I was just going to do exactly what I did when I learned to ride a bike. I mean, not exactly. I wanted to be part of it. So I said, all right, there's the bike. Put it on two wheels, turn the pedals, try not to fall. Let me know how it goes.
Mm.
And everything in my body is screaming at me, going, no, you have to go, like, make sure those training wheels fit correctly. You walk behind him to make sure he doesn't fall. And of course, my wife's behind me telling me the same thing. She's like,
Yeah.
don't make, don't let him fall. Make sure he's okay. So I just let him do it. And I watched him fall. And when he fell, like every parent who's ever been through this knows it. Like when he fell, I look away. I'm like, nope. Oh, what happened? I wasn't watching
Yeah. Yeah.
because as long as you're not watching, it's like, what is that? The Schrodinger's cat paradox. Like, if I'm not watching, did he really get hurt?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, sure enough, he got back up. No tears, nothing. Got back up, got on the bike, and tried it again. And so he did this process like it was only three times or something. And next thing I know, he's riding down the street. He's still got training wheels, but he's riding down the street. I'm like, wow, you really picked that up fast. I go, you want to take the training wheels off? He's like, well, why would I want to do that? Oh, because you can go faster.
Mm.
Oh, yeah, I want to go fast. So takes him off and he just starts riding. And I'm
Mm.
just sitting there going, wow, there's something to this element of trust, of like explaining it in simple terms, letting people arrive at their own conclusions, and making sure that you're there to support them if they need it. So I'm telling my leaders this, right? And I can see the wheels turning in their head. They are clearly soaking this up. And when I got done with that story, I said, you all just learned how to ride a bike and you've got training wheels on. I'm the training wheels, but
Mm.
I'm taking off and going home because as much as I love y'all, I love my family more and Thanksgiving dinner, and I'm going home to have some. And when I'm gone, you're going to have to ride.
Yeah.
And you know what? You're going to fall. You are going to piss people off. people are going to get mad at you, and you're going to have to take it. You're going to have to help them bring that level back down and calm them down. And you're just going to have to keep learning. And here's the thing though, our company expects that. You are not punished for that. You are expected to fail, because if you never fail, it means you're not taking any risks. It means you're not innovating. And it means that you are just playing it safe the whole time. You've got one foot on the ground and you're not really writing. So I want you to go out there and I want you to give absolutely legendary service to people and blow their minds with how awesome you can be. And if that doesn't work out, and people yell at you and they mark you down on those surveys after the call or whatever, that's fine. Just learn from it and don't let it keep happening, because that's when we have a problem. And I'm like, it's time to take those training wheels off. We hired you because we trust you, because we have faith in you, and because we know how badass you are and how able you are to do all of these things that we've trained you to do. So get out there and ride. And
Mm.
the moment that I said that, this room of 20 people who was like all sitting there just staring and listening to me intently, and like that felt pretty good. Uh, they erupted into applause. They all came like running to the front of the room, and it was a big old 20-person group hug. Like I genuinely had my Rudy moment, like where I'm getting carried off the field. They didn't actually carry me. That would have been cool. But it was just one of those moments where it clicked and you realized all of the work that went into setting up this training, and all of the work, the tireless long nights of writing and revising and um, answering questions and doing all of that, it paid off because they got it.
Right.
And the best part of it was the following week, while I was at home, I was like, okay, I know I'm not supposed to look at the kid riding the bike and all, because if I look, they might fall, but I want to peek in and see how they're doing. And what they were doing was nothing short of amazing. Absolutely amazing. I mean, like I've never seen that from brand new people that have just gotten out of training before. And I
Mm.
genuinely feel that it was the confidence that we showed. It was giving them permission to make mistakes and to learn from them, so that they don't have that hanging over their heads anymore. But just that element of trust, it's so strong. And it's one of those qualities that, they call it a soft skill. And I hate that. I hate the term soft skill, because I know what it's supposed to mean. Like the hard skills are that's technical stuff. But the soft skills are anything but soft. They are the firm foundation upon which everything else is built. If you
Yeah.
don't have communication, you don't have trust. If you can't demonstrate empathy and compassion, everything else that you do is doomed to fail at that point. So maybe they need to switch places. Maybe the hard
Yeah.
skills need to be soft skills and the other way around.
Yeah, because these things are they take different names as the technology changes or the context changes, but it clearly is a reward and punishment system that's in us um, for years in the work we do, right? Whether it's build that wall and
Mhm.
sculpt that stone into something beautiful, or make a presentation, or handle a customer complaint, or whatever it could be. But as we have more of this in the public eye, where your punishments are captured and screen grabs of calls gone bad with customer service, or say a restaurant menus taken a screenshot of and put up online and criticized, and or an encounter between a waiter and a customer, or a police officer, and whatever it could be, right? um,
Mhm.
there's this fear of being honest. There's a fear of trusting. There's a fear of being vulnerable, because what happens in that context of that interaction is then being scrutinized by whoever who has no connection to that environment, but brings their bias to it, saying all waiters are assholes, right? Like, because
Hmm.
they just have the power of doing so with a click of a button or
Yeah.
a stroke of a few keys. And I find that extremely um, unfortunate, because it takes away a human to human interaction, or humans to humans
Mm.
in a certain number, because the dynamics do change and they do matter, right, as the number of people grow. And suddenly you have someone who has no vested interest, who's got no context, who's got no reason to be there, saying I'm going to comment um because I can.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because technology has allowed me to,
Yeah.
and
And I
I
think
have no
that's
consequences.
and I think that's totally unnecessary, because
Mhm.
it just gives you a power you don't deserve.
Right. No, absolutely. And this is one of those things I was talking about with my students last night about how in person, when you're interacting with somebody, there's a certain set of filters that we put up. It's automatic out of self-preservation. I don't go up to the biggest guy that I can find and I start making fun of his mom like randomly
Yeah.
because bad stuff might happen,
Yeah.
like painfully bad stuff.
Yeah.
Well, when it's online and we remove that physical threat, what's stopping me? And so those filters, they just disappear. And oftentimes the worst of humanity comes out. And it comes out partially because it's been stifled, because we've had those filters up. And there's a
Mm.
certain level of dopamine boost that comes with it, that comes with that power of being unnecessarily aggressive.
Mm.
Um, the problem with it is that when people do that and they get the dopamine boost, it's really, I'm not going to say it's exactly the same as doing heroin or something, because that's a lot worse, but that dopamine rush that you get can be addictive. And then all of a sudden you're looking for it again because, hey, it feels good to be powerful. It feels good to put other people down and see them get really upset because that gives me power. Next thing you know, they're chasing the virtual dragon and they're seeking out more and more and more until the line between their face-to-face relationships and virtual relationships kind of disappears. And the more they act this aggressive troll persona online, the more likely they're going to start spilling over into their real world relationships. And then they become a real life troll. And it's something that happens so slowly and subtly that it's like that old analogy of like the frog and the boiling water and everything. Like it'll jump out, but if you slowly turn up the heat, it'll cook. I don't think that would actually happen. I'm pretty sure the frog would jump out no matter what.
Yeah.
It would just take longer in the cold water. But
Yeah.
it's interesting how that happens because it's like people just forget how to be human because there's a disconnect that happens with it online. We haven't figured out how to fully supplement nonverbal communication online. Sure, we have GIFs and we have emojis and text or font treatments and things like that. Profile pictures. We've even got video now. So all of those things are great, but they haven't replaced in-person interaction fully, and not until we get smell and
Yeah.
touch. We're missing out on those senses, and so it lacks that sense of immediacy. And so people will they'll continue to be kind of awful, or at least more potential to be awful. And I've felt that myself before. I probably said things before I wouldn't normally say in person. But that really comes down to awareness. And that's one of the skills that I really try to develop is that sense of awareness of here's what I'm saying. I am aware of how it's going to impact the person I'm saying it to and anyone else who's around who happens to hear or see that. And so I'm going to choose my words carefully. There's an interesting theory in communication called transactional communication theory that says every interaction that we go into, We view it as a transaction, like
Mm-hmm.
in business, where um, when I interact with, like, if I'm interacting with you here on this call and I perceive a high value from that interaction, I'm going to get something out of this, whatever that might be, but it's valuable.
Yeah.
I am going to be more cautious with my words. I'm going to think more critically about what I share. When we perceive that value as low, that's when you get the wild Karens and Chads throwing things at cashiers in your local Target because they're upset with some return policy, which, I worked for Target for a time and I've actually seen it happen. I saw someone throw an entire toaster oven at an employee before because they were mad at the return policy. So you don't perceive a lot of value from somebody working a cashier job because they're beneath you or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, but what we need to do is we need to be more mindful of that tendency and to see each other as humans. In fact, this brings up something that just happened this morning. When I came back to Guatemala this weekend, I brought a bunch of boxes of like branded merchandise because I wanted to bring it as like prizes for when people answer questions right or they take risks and fail. Like I want to encourage that. So not failure, but the risk taking. Um, but I I made sure to put together a few of those gifts, and I gave it to my driver. This driver who has been so gracious to pick me up from the airport every time, to give me rides to and from the site,
Mm.
to wait so patiently when I had a late afternoon because I had to take care of something. This guy's given up his family time to serve me, so it's the least I could do to serve him back, to recognize his humanity. And so I brought him back some gifts. This dude had tears in his eyes. Like, this is a former special forces veteran here in Guatemala and like tough as nails. This guy had tears in his eyes because he said, people don't always think about the driver. They're so busy and they're thinking about their destination and where I'm taking them that I just kind of become vegetation sitting on the side. He's like,
Yeah.
this means a lot to me. And like that almost brought tears to my eyes because I'm like, why don't people see each other as human anymore? Why is it
It's the
so
label of what you do.
objectified and
Yeah.
labeled? Yeah. Um, it's
You know, you
just
mentioned
we
this
need to see
idea
that.
of watching your environment and how that determines the way you speak, right? Um, but in a chat room or in a system where there are millions of people, but you can't see any of them,
Mm,
you kind of the filters I think are very important. And you know what? It's a strange thing because I can't see where I am all the time, who's around me.
mm.
I kind of automatically have to either be completely rude, irrespective, or completely nice. And I think for years, the conditioning is like, be nice, don't upset anyone.
Yeah.
Um, but something funny happened the other day. My wife, daughter, and I had gone out somewhere. We got dropped off, and I got down to the car, and my wife was taking our daughter out of the car seat, and I took a step back, and I bought this old car, and it it looked really nice in that light, right? And I just stood there, and I
Mhm.
go, and I thought my wife was next to me with our daughter. I said, "Doesn't she just look beautiful? This old car." And it wasn't my wife. It was some random person who walked by, and he must have thought, "What a dickhead! He's standing there talking, appreciating his car." And trying to tell anyone who goes by about how good looking his car is. And I genuinely want to tell my wife. So I thought
Oh
of that in
no.
this context because, it's happened to me so many times where just to be polite, and I'm not lying about this, but once um, my wife and I'd gone to, I think, Marks and Spencer, she had to buy some stuff. So she said, just wait in this place. I'll go get everything done and come back quickly.
Mhm,
And I was just standing there. And of course, there's this I think I'm the school of thought where be over nice as opposed to the risk of upsetting
mhm,
anyone because you're visually impaired, you might need help kind of thing. I come from that
mhm,
overcompensating era and generation. And I was just like, there's someone next to me, and it's impolite of me not to talk to them, and I just have to talk to them. So I'm like, is everything okay? What are you doing over here? Why are you standing here? I mean, not why are you standing here, but what's happening? Like, what are you doing here? Are you
Yeah.
also waiting for someone? And this person is not responding, and it's getting me really upset. And I'm like, what the? Why isn't this person? What have I done wrong? And it automatically sends me into this feedback loop in my head, saying, have I upset them? Have I? And then my wife's like, who are you talking to? She comes back, and I'm like, there's someone next to me, and they're not answering. She's like, that's the mannequin, right? You don't have
Oh no.
to. So
What a rude mannequin that
yeah.
was. Jeez.
So it just triggered all these things in my head. I was like, man, I've made such a fool of myself, but at the cost of not upsetting people. Like, um, but
It's a great trade-off, honestly. It
it's
really
great
is. Like I
stories.
would rather be a fool and have fun stories like the time I talked to a mannequin.
Yeah. Or this
Oh.
jackass standing there telling passers-by how great his car looks.
Oh, that happened to me the other day too. I was getting into an elevator and I was holding a piece of cake, and it was really good cake. And the person who made the cake was with me. She had said something about like, "Oh, make sure that you eat that before you go home." And as I'm getting in the elevator, I step on someone's foot, and I think that it's the one who made the cake. And I turned to her, and I had momentum going into it. And so I couldn't stop myself. Even as I saw that this person was not the person I thought it was, I continued to say, don't worry, anybody who tries to touch this cake is going to lose a goddamn hand. And I said it so aggressively. And she just looks at me like, I'm sorry. Like, no, I'm sorry. I thought you were someone else.
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know if that's changed. These are moments between people, right? Whether it's exciting, whether it's embarrassing, whether it's fun, whether it's intimate, whether it's that group of your uh, trainees and you, and but these make it the experience of being human, right? Whether it's a
Mhm,
fight, whether it's road rage, whatever it may be, it's a story you go tell another human being. But with the introduction of a camera between two individuals, with the possibility of recording that and broadcasting it, what has it done to the way we interact as humans? I'm just curious because it takes away that personal touch, whether it's for good or bad, right? I mean, in a bad
mhm,
situation, it's great to have a camera so you can broadcast it. There's accountability. But where
mhm,
do you draw the line, right? Like with CCTVs, it's for safety, but there's also CCTVs just being used and abused for the wrong
mhm,
thing. And even cameras where, okay, you're a person in an intimidating setting and you want to put on your body camera or whatever camera, fine.
mhm,
And that's maybe why it was created, for safety. But you flip that around and now it just becomes a spy cam where you're trying to spy on anyone to step out of line, even for a second, unknowingly, without the intention of hurting anyone. And you come down hard on them, or and I like an entity, the internet comes down hard on them, which is a bunch of
yeah,
unrelated, unconnected idiots who have too much time on their hands commenting on everything they're not supposed to comment on. So
yeah.
where, yeah, and this is something you mentioned on your website, and it really kind of, it stuck out, and it captured my um, idea of what's going on. Is this word mediocrity, and how do you perceive it in this context, and maybe also um, with the interaction, with the content we are observing, with the content we are demanding as and I don't want to speak of all of us as a collective, because I think there's a lot of unique preferences, there's a lot of unique tastes, and there's a lot of individuals who do have a lot of respect for artists and art and for creation and for invention, but a good number who don't.
Mhm. You gave me a lot to work with there, and I'm going
Sorry,
to
I
try
just
to
had to.
unpack it.
Yeah, I
It
just had
was
to
great.
get it out of my face.
It, I've got at least three stories in my mind, and I'm like, oh, okay, I may have to pick and choose here. Um, so the first thing that came to mind when you're talking about doing virtual communication and then you putting a camera up, and how has that changed us? That one of the best stories that I can tell you about this was something that just happened last year, and it blew my mind. Like, even though I had had tons of experience in education, probably far more than I should have. Um, this still, it was like one of those aha light bulb moments that I didn't see coming.
Hmm.
So COVID hits, everybody goes home. We transitioned to online education, and it created all sorts of problems because there were clearly organizations that were ready for it and organizations that were most definitely 30 or 40 years behind the learning curve
Yeah.
and didn't want to. And so now they were forced to, and they kind of sucked at it. So I saw a whole range, but for 2 years, so from roughly March 2020 to early 2022, um, every single class that I taught was online.
Mm.
And that gave me the freedom to move to a totally different side of the country without interrupting work. I could work from the car if I
Yeah.
needed to. Like, I loved the freedom. Well, what happened in spring of 2022 is I got an invitation to teach my first on campus in person course in 2 years. I said, yes, please get me back in the classroom. You can't replace that fully, and I miss it. So I go back to the classroom with high hopes and energy, and I'm so ready to do this again. And good Lord, what a lifeless, zombified group of people that was.
Mm.
I mean, I'm using my best material. This is stuff that I have always gotten a laugh from students on, or and whoa, like that's really mind blowing to hear about that. I was getting nothing, no reactions. So the fact that this was my first time teaching at this, it was for Chapman University. So I totally different demographic than I'm used to. I'm used to
Yeah.
more of like a community college demographic, and here I am teaching like kind of a bougie, much more affluent
Mm.
demographic. And so I ascribe it to that. Like, oh, well, it's just because there are all these upper class kids who mommy and daddy have a lot of money. And I stopped myself and I was like, wow, Josh, you're being kind of a judgmental prick.
Yeah.
Like, it may have nothing to do with that. So after I gave myself a good admonishment, I went to social media and I contacted everyone I know who's teaching. And I said, okay, what are you noticing about this return to campus? Like, what is different to you? Every single one of them said the same thing. Oh
Mm.
my God, they're lifeless. They're zombies. I can't get them to answer questions. I have to practically threaten them to get them to raise their hands.
Mm.
And then students are coming and going. They're just getting up in the middle of the class and leaving and then
Mm.
coming back like they went to the food machine or something. It's baffling. And that's when it clicked. I said, oh my God, for 2 years we've been on Zoom. We've been sitting in front of a computer, lifeless, expressionless. We pause our video to get up and go to the fridge and get a snack. And then we come back because we've got headphones on and we can hear it the whole time.
And that's really
We
inconsiderate of
don't
you
know how to,
of not having a pause button on you.
yeah, right. Uh,
Yeah.
we forgot how to be human in person.
Mm.
So when that realization hit me, I'm like, wow, there's like a paper waiting to be written, and I don't want to write it, but I do want to talk about it. And so I started talking about it with these students, and they're like, you know what? That kind of makes sense. And I hadn't really thought about it. But yeah, when I sit there and I'm looking all bored like this, it's the exact same way that I sat at home on Zoom because it's comfortable. I need a kickstand for my head.
Mm.
It's not that I'm bored, I'm just getting comfortable. So then, end of the semester, they do their course evaluations, and of course, I don't get them back until well after final grades have been posted because nobody wants to be see a petty professor who
Yeah, yeah.
punishes everyone because they raked him over the coals. But every single evaluation was nothing short of amazing. It's like, oh, thank you for this return to campus. This was exactly what I needed. I
Mm.
think I even had one student who said, I have just changed my major. I am going to be a professor because I want to be you when I grow up. It's like,
Nice.
damn, like That's cool. You didn't even have to kiss up. I gave you your final grade.
Right.
But the next semester that I taught, same university, same class, it was in the fall. So we'd had a summer to kind of reacclimate the in-person interaction. It was totally different. It was back to normal. They were lively, they participated, and I'm just going, okay, that's more like it. But this phenomenon of being in front of a tool that we use for communication and then having that tool shape and mold us, like we fit into the mold of that tool, whatever that might be, for better or for worse, we adapt to it, and then we don't always change back so easily. So that was the
Yeah.
first item. Oh, sorry, did you
No, I was just,
want to
yeah,
say
no, I was
something?
just thinking like that it's the clear example of what a beneficial tool can do
Mhm.
if it's over, exposed to us.
Right. And I'm going to quote somebody's very, very wise uncle who sadly passed away with great power comes great responsibility. And Uncle Ben was right. Like these tools, they have so much power. And when, for example, when ChatGPT was invented, its inventors said, hey, we've got this amazing tool that can help us unlock the mysteries of the universe and it can do all these great things. Oh, and by the way, yeah, college students are going to use it to cheat and write papers for them. Like nobody saw that coming,
Yeah.
but you've got a benefit and you've got a very serious consequence there. And it's all in how we use it. And so if how we use it determines the health and the benefits of that tool, then as educators, we better be teaching things like morals and integrity and critical thinking and decision making, because
Mm.
that is what's going to determine whether humanity ends up becoming its own downfall or we end up on spaceships exploring other planets and
Yeah,
having
because
cool stuff.
the problem is that you can't teach these these the things like certification, more knowledge. It's become a given. You can take it and get it anywhere, right? You can get
Yeah, yeah.
lectures like the great courses, and learn about the entire history of America or history of India in an audiobook or a
Mhm,
YouTube seminar or whatever's the medium. But how do you interpret that, or how do you determine? Because now with misusing chat gpt or being a complete troll online, these aren't
mhm.
things that schools emphasize on, right? I mean, what they'll do is they'll kick you out of
Right.
the classroom if you're making a mess of it, or they'll suspend you, or they'll expel you depending on the severity. But
Mhm,
this whole thing boils down to power, and you mentioned power earlier. Earlier it was, of course, and there is, of course, disparity in power. There is the powerful few, but with what the internet promised or promises or continues to promise is a decentralization of power in some way, right? It's
mhm,
no longer
mhm,
just the politicians, just the oligarchs, just the 1%, and just the celebrities who have all the power and money, but to some extent it's being spread apart and spread to a lot more other people. Like a person now can make it as a YouTuber or a gamer or a social media influencer on Instagram or a TikToker. So in some way the power is the same. Even when you say I have the power of clicking a like or trashing this person's product or creation or service, it's power.
mhm,
But how and earlier, you would hear stories of a person getting a lot of power as a result, a lot of money, and then going off the deep end, abusing that power in whatever form, whether it's the dictator, or whether it's the
mhm,
CEO who cheated on his wife or did whatever
mhm.
quote unquote horrendous thing, right? But now
Right.
with 1,000 fans on OnlyFans or with 100,000 followers on Instagram, you get that sense of power, and you see a lot more
Mhm.
people
Wait, you've
for a
seen my OnlyFans?
not yet, but
Just kidding.
I was waiting for after the conversation because I wanted the
Yeah.
intimacy before I saw
Yeah,
just the
yeah. I mean,
physical.
guys got to make a side hustle. You know what I mean?
I love it. Yeah. But
Uh,
you see a lot like you would, we would be critical, right? Sitting having a beer, going, "How could Tiger do that to his wife?" Right? Tiger Woods. But now you see people with 100 followers on Instagram, and say like there's a comedian or a musician with like say 1,000 followers on Instagram, and like he gets three DMs with people saying, a girl saying, or whatever his taste is, saying, "Would you like to meet up?" And the temptation when you have power to to use that power is in every human being. So
yeah.
what you're saying is essential, like, teaching these things, or not even teaching, but um, you know sh- showing the importance of these things like morality and empathy and compassion. But how do you design a system? Because it takes time, right? I can't teach you
Mhm.
empathy 101, because it doesn't work like
Right,
that.
right, right. It has to start early. I mean, a lot of people are like, oh, well, where are their parents? Why are their parents teaching them this thing?
Yeah.
Because, that's an easy answer. It's an easy way to blame the parents rather than to look at the complexity and the nuance of, 18 plus years of child rearing.
Mm.
Um, it's so complicated. And honestly, I just saw an article, I think it was in the New York Times. I'm gonna have to go find it now, but it said that a new study has shown that parental influence is significantly less than what we think. And this is why so many horrible parents end up with great kids, and so many great parents end up with little monsters, because it's so much more a factor of everything else combined. It's environment, it's media, it's friends, it's school, it's um, so many influences, and parents are just one piece of that. So if we really want to teach things like empathy and compassion and seeing each other as human again, it's going to take a radical rethinking of education in general.
Yeah.
And you brought this up earlier about how punishment is stigmatized, and we need the right answers, and they need to be right the first time. And people are scared of vulnerability, right? Well, there's one fundamental core problem that's driving all of that attitude, and actually comes out of the 19th century industrial revolution. Um, it's that we as Western culture do not handle uncertainty well. We
No.
are freaking terrified of uncertainty. We want things planned and laid out in front of us. We want to know exactly what to expect. And when we don't get that, we freak out. And when we freak out, the rational part of the brain shuts down, and then the lizard brain takes over. And the next thing you know, you've got your amygdala that's driving the brain bus. And it's not a good driver because
Mm.
it's an angry driver. So we do things that we end up regretting later.
Yeah.
Well, we've got to stop looking at education as like this model of a child's brought into this world as an empty vessel, and all of these teachers swoop in to fill the vessel. And once the child's done, you take a test, and if you pass the test, you have worth as a human. And if you don't, well, go figure it out. You're on
Mm.
your own.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, because everybody that I've ever met has a talent, has a skill, has something amazing about them. And a lot of the time, what's amazing about them is something that education doesn't measure, it
Yeah.
doesn't teach. They had to develop it on their own. And why? Because those things are uncertain. You can't measure vulnerability. You can't measure compassion. We haven't figured that out yet. And so if there's not a measurement for it, and
It's not worth it.
you can't create a multiple choice quiz
Yeah.
to pass it and suddenly say, yeah, I've got empathy. You have to wrestle with it, and it's uncomfortable, and it's hard. And we don't like that. We would much rather avoid it, call somebody a name, end the relationship, and walk away, because that's easy.
Mm.
But like, I've been with my wife for 22 years, and everyone's always like, "Oh, congratulations, that's so awesome," or "You two are so cute together." I'm like, "You have not seen us because for most of those 22 years, we have been clawing and scratching at each other, and we have been not actually. This is figurative,
Yeah, I know you have
but
to. I'm
we
glad you
have
put that disclaimer out there. Yeah.
exactly.
He
We're
claws
talking
his
about
wife.
this
My God.
internet thing. Yeah, well, some people's kinks are different, but yeah, we've fought a lot, and like my kids even comment on it sometimes. They're like, "Oh, I'm so tired of the fighting," and I look at them. I'm like, "Okay, listen, we fight in front of you guys because we want to show you how to fight. We want to show you that you can be respectful during a fight, that you can continue to fight until you come to a compromise
Yeah.
and an arrangement or an agreement, and then you make up." Like when I grew up, my parents didn't fight in front of us, which did not prepare me for marriage. That's
And
when,
not just
like, first
fighting.
few
I
fights,
think
I'm, oh,
fighting starts from a conversation which goes out of control or it
mhm,
escalates, right? But the other
yeah,
opposite is we don't even talk and then suppress, suppress,
oh,
suppress.
hmm,
And that makes you terrified of confrontation. And the next thing you know, the moment something comes up, you either walk away or you burst.
yeah, yeah. This ties back to what you were saying earlier about the person who gets a lot of money and then they're suddenly like doing all these horrible things.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's scholarship on that that says that, oh, I think it was I can never pronounce his name right. Paulo Freire. Anyway, he wrote Pedagogy of the Oppressed.
Okay.
And in this book, he talks about how if a people are oppressed for a long time and then eventually overcome it and they become leaders, they get control, they get power, that they will turn into the oppressed or the oppressors because
Mm-hmm.
that's all they know.
Yeah.
That's the only model they've ever had of leadership. And nowhere is that more true than in higher education because professors out there who are total arrogant blowhards who seem to enjoy inflicting pain and misery on their students, they're not bad people. They just didn't have a better role model. So
Yeah.
they think that's normal. That's what it's supposed to be. That's how it looks.
And
And
doesn't that though
I can't
come
tell
from a
you.
home situation? Sorry, just for a moment.
Mhm,
When
mhm,
you said parenting doesn't have the influence that people say it
mhm,
does, but doesn't it when you see your parents, when you said when your kids talk about you fighting, but when you talk to them about what you're doing or why you're doing that, when your wife and you are doing that, or in my case, but
mhm,
if you're as a kid stonewalled and not explained to, or whatever you witness as a child, like the way your parents are, the way your parents aren't, or the way they speak, or the way they um, speak to the staff at home, or whether they speak to their employers or employees, don't these things have a much more um, bigger impact from, say, from the moment the child is born to the time they go to school, than um, than how they're I mean, of course, this takes into account environment, which is the home, which is the people in the home, which is the parents. And I think that's something which is a huge impact, right? Because by the time you go meet your friends, you already have this in your head, the way you speak to people around you, people perceivably below you, above you, your elders, your stronger ones, your more powerful ones. But all those, I think, of course, unless the kid comes out of the thing, uh, comes out into life watching movies, but which I, can try avoiding. Um, I feel, yeah, that thing is so much what we take on later in life. Like when I look back to when I was 5 or 6, I don't remember before that, maybe
mhm.
there is a lot of what happens around me, which I pick up on the tone which people around me spoke in, the way they spoke to each other, the way they spoke in escalations and encounters, and that is in a lot of ways stuck with me, even though in many ways I try to educate it out of my system.
Right. That this is something I've actually studied pretty extensively because when I can't remember what age I was. I want to say it was super early, like 9 or 10. I had this like epiphany moment and I can't even explain it, but I dream, I woke up from the dream. I remembered it as being like I was older, I was a father, I had a really happy family and everything. And I remember thinking at that moment, like, my number one goal in life is to become a dad. Like,
Mm.
what kind of kid thinks that at 9 or 10?
That's
Um, but I did. And I became a father at 19. I got married right out of high school, which I don't recommend to anyone. Uh, that marriage did not go so well. But anyway, it was just, I had such a desire to be a father that by the time I did become one, I I wanted to soak up as much information as I could on what it takes to be a great father.
Mm.
And so I threw everything I had into it. I was obsessing over it to the point where, there was a few times, like the bike riding story, that I recognized I was being a bit of a helicopter parent. And so I needed to back off because I knew that can create lots of problems as well. Well, as I started researching fatherhood and everything and talking to more fathers in this research, I found that there was really two types of outcomes from childhood, from influence from your parents. You either strive to be just like them,
Mm.
whether that's consciously or subconsciously, or you strive to be anything but like them.
Yeah.
And that can be for better or for worse as well. And I've met equal measures of both, which
Right.
just fascinates me. I don't know still what that trigger point is that flips the switch into I am going to be a great person because my parents are assholes,
Mm.
or
The
I
other way
want to
around.
be just like my parents.
Yeah.
The just like my parents, that's much more common, or at least people talk about it more. But
But the
it's
flip, right?
the flip is just, it's so interesting what causes that. But yeah, the influences are, there's so many of them, and it's just this super complicated web of influence that it's hard to be able to tell which one is greater. And even if you do figure that out, the second you go look at another family, it's going to be different. So it's
Yeah.
very unpredictable.
Yeah, and that's it's such a fine balance, right? Like and I'm not even now trying to put this in perspective of um, your kids or my kid. It's just that in your own life, when you look at the things that sometimes as far back as you can possibly remember without bias, is it's and this is without and these are real memories, right? And I can only imagine now with um, the experience is being broken down into 30-second bite-sized consumable bits or 49, 50-second bits. Like, for instance, just last evening I was having a beer and I was like, you know what, I'm going to go through some reels. um, and literally 5 minutes later I've probably gone through whatever 5 minutes, a lot of reels, right? And none of them stuck. Did they make me smile? Some of them did. Did it frustrate me? Not as much as I thought. But then I go back to what I typically do, which is put on my audiobook and listen and have a beer. And the difference was one was so-called more engaging because it was made to engage me more. It was a person putting that entire thing into that 1 minute, the way it was packaged, the way it was so-called meant to be done, right? There's a certain science
Right.
to Instagram Reels. And the other was a
Hmm.
story being told by a human being, of course, read out by another human being, and both through technology in the most amazing, quickly delivered way. And I'm not trying to put my bias of a 40-year-old into this, but I found myself less stressed when I was listening to the book.
Mm.
I was not I was not on edge. And I can't put the word edge as like, oh, I'm a as a definition, but there's a feeling of restlessness when you're watching the reels. And that's not there when you're
Mm.
listening to a book.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And one thing that this brings up for me is I was doing a study on creativity because I was going through a phase where I wanted to get to the bottom of creativity. Like, how do you generate it? How do you
Yeah.
foster it? And whatever, because I had read some book and I just off and running with it. Well, in this reading, the thing that shocked me more than anything else is that one of the biggest precursors to creative thinking, that state of flow where suddenly your juices are going and you're like, man, I'm like in the zone now, doing my best writing or doing my best art or whatever. Um, it's always preceded by boredom. And
Mm.
that is mind blowing to me because what is it that we avoid the most anymore? It's the discomfort that comes with boredom. I mean, you see it everywhere. And reading about this, I'm like, okay, boredom, huh? So I'm going to start paying attention and seeing what people do when they're bored. So I'd
Mm.
go to the grocery store and I would just stand there and kind of like creepily watch people coming up to the checkout line. And it was like I could hit a stopwatch predictably, and they'd get up to the line, and it was like less than 7 seconds after getting in the line into the pocket for the phone, just like
Mm.
automatic. It was so predictable. And so then I thought, okay, let's experiment with this a little bit. And I decided to use my students because, I mean, what is a classroom if
Yeah,
not for a bunch of guinea pigs?
absolutely.
So I said, and I told them about this, and they said, okay, I want to try a little activity here because we happen to be talking about mindful awareness and vulnerability at the time, and like self awareness. And I said, this is all going hand in hand with that. I mean, if you don't want to try, you don't have to, but I would encourage you to. I said, your task over the weekend is to find some time to go spend an hour alone, period. Nothing else. No phone, no book, no music, no pets, no nothing. Literally, you sitting for an hour or walking, like you can go for a walk too, but you're not allowed to interact with anything outside your head.
Mm.
It's just you. And then, somebody's like, well, what if I have to go to the bathroom? Okay, interact with a toilet. That's fine. Like,
Yeah.
do
Don't
what you
piss
got to
yourself.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would ruin things pretty fast
Yeah.
and make you cold. But after the warmth, of course.
Yeah.
But so another student raises his hand, and he's sitting there so patiently with his hand raised while I'm talking and trying to get these thoughts out. So I finally get done. I was like, all right, what do you got for me? And he just lowers his hand and so nonchalantly he goes, why do you hate us so much? Always stuck out to me. But I said, look, I'm going to be doing it too, because I'm never going to ask you to do with anything that I wouldn't be willing to do myself. And so
Mm.
I'm going to do this. And then when we come back next week, we all get to report on it. And if
Yeah.
it didn't work and it's total failure, hey, you're going to get credit for it anyway, because
Mm.
this one of those activities, it's just participation points. So I will admit it was incredibly difficult. And I thought it was going to be easy because I tend to like time alone. It was difficult. Like I had those phantom vibrations going in my pocket, and I kept looking for my phone and going, oh my God, like how much longer now? Oh, 59 minutes. Cool.
Yeah.
So when we all came back the next week, the same student that asked, why do you hate us so much, was just sitting there silently the whole class. And everybody's like sharing their thoughts. They're talking about how amazing it was, how creative they felt afterward, which I was like, ding, ding, ding. I didn't tell them about creativity, by the way. They just happened to mention how creative they felt. So
Mm.
then I'm still waiting. I'm still waiting. And finally, things get quiet. And normally, when things get quiet in a classroom, again, if I start a stopwatch, 10 seconds is about the max silence most people can take without breaking it and like having to do something else. So we're just sitting there, and I'm looking at the clock on the wall behind the students in the very back of the room. And I'm like, okay, we've hit like 20 seconds now, and I'm feeling the discomfort.
Mm.
The one student finally raises their hand and said, yeah, go ahead. I've been waiting for this. And what they said was so profound that it still sticks with me to this day. In fact, I've incorporated it in my books and everything, and with permission, of course. And they said that the thing that I found while doing this is that if I can't be alone for an hour with my own thoughts, how can I expect anybody else to? And I was like, okay, who has my rubber stamp? Because you just got an A for the entire course. In fact, come back and teach it next semester because I'm quitting. I can't top that. Like that was just amazing.
Mm,
And it's so true. Like, why can't we spend an hour alone with our own thoughts? What is it that we're so afraid of that we don't want to be alone with our thoughts? So I asked my wife to do it, and she said no. Like there was no amount of convincing I could do for her. She just said no.
mm,
So I continued doing this with students, and the link to creativity was constantly there because, like you were saying, when you're watching reels and everything's all fast paced, you don't have time to think. You don't
mm,
have time for your brain to digest and process it through memory consolidation and all of that. It's just going too fast. But when you're listening to a podcast, when you're taking your time and doing something slowly, our brains actually have a chance to run it through the dishwasher and put the dishes away in the old thought cupboard over there and hang on to those memories. And it feels more fulfilling because it is, because you are creating lasting memories. I mean, do you remember the reels that you were watching?
in
Do
fact,
any of
sometimes
them like stand out?
in a social situation, I'm like, um, you know, you laughed at some reel and you try to recollect what that reel was, and you just can't unless you
Yeah.
watched it like multiple times. But if there's a joke from, say, you know, Robin Williams or Billy Connolly's audio
Hmm.
CD or the special I watched many years back, like this guy, I can remember the joke,
Yeah.
um, or the or any story which I think, as you said, put the dishes away kind of thing is a nice analogy because it's almost like while you're listening, like I'm listening to an audiobook right now, which is set in Memphis. No, it's set in Mississippi, and it's 38
Hmm.
hours long. And granted, there've been moments where I press play and I put the headphones on and I wake up 8 hours later and a lot of the chapters have gone by. That happens. But
Yeah.
that, while you're listening actively or passively, because that's what some people do, you can still daydream, right? You can still immerse yourself in that story.
Hmm.
You can still take that story into your context. And I think that's not boredom, but it is the beauty of that creation, right? Because when I
Right.
listen to that book, I've never been to Mississippi, but I can kind of, as in my own realm, visualize what those characters are doing, whether they're walking, what they look like, what the airfield where the plane landed looked like. It's giving you the license to build off what the author or the creator has done, and
Hmm.
there's absolutely no scope of that when it's forced down your throat in the most heavily packaged way in 35 seconds.
Yeah, I use the word boredom because people get it,
Yeah,
but that's the wrong word. It's
yeah.
actually not the word that they use in the research either. They use ennui, but you mentioned ennui, and like most people are like, huh?
Yeah,
Is that like a new um, erectile dysfunction
yeah.
medicine or something? No, it's not. That
No, I
is
like boredom.
ennui is
Yeah,
ennui is just it's the dissatisfaction or discomfort that we get when we feel unoccupied. We're
yeah.
not engaged with anything, and the brain suddenly like starts kicking and screaming to do something, and if we don't have anything to do, it will take over, and that's why those ideas start to bubble up. And I always ask people, where do the best ideas come from? What are you doing when the best ideas come? And without fail, it's always the shower, doing the dishes, sitting on the toilet, um, going for a walk and listening to music right before bed. I'm like, what do all of those have in common? You're not doing anything that requires a lot of brain power. if you're doing the dishes or taking a shower, you're doing a single function task and your brain isn't processing anything else. So it allows those connections to be made. And that's when you start winning every single argument in the shower that like you wish you could do in real life because the best lines always come up at that point.
Yeah.
So we need to find ways to foster that, to slow down. And I'm not going to be like technophobe here and say like kill your TV, throw your phone in the garbage. I love my phone. I work for a cellular company. Like they're great.
Yeah.
Could I live without it? Maybe, but do I want to find out? No, not really. Um, it's all about balance. It's about being able to set aside that time once in a while just so that you can take back control over
Yeah.
your attention span, over your thought process, so that you're not just mindlessly walking from one thing to the next. So that when you're in the grocery store checkout line and 7 seconds have passed, you don't reach for your phone, but rather you continue to people watch because
Mm.
people are kind of fascinating. Or
Yeah.
maybe you're reading the tabloids and going, okay, what's the British royal family doing now?
And
But
I do that. I
yeah,
find that fascinating because I think now with technology, I sometimes am waiting for someone or I'm sitting somewhere alone and I put on my pods, but I'm not listening to anything. I'm just I'm eavesdropping,
mhm.
right? Because I have the right image of someone who's engaged in the virtual
Yes.
world, but I'm actually like, what is this? And my wife can tell, right? Because my head just slowly starts going towards the conversation. She's like, stop doing that. It's like whether we're at a restaurant and she's like, stop doing that. You're listening to the table next to us. I'm like, oh, damn it. She can tell. She can see the tells.
She's like,
But
you're staring with your ears.
yeah,
Knock it
that's
off.
absolutely what I'm doing.
Oh,
But that's such a beautiful thing. When I was looking into this thing of time restricted feeding, intermittent fasting, people call it different things, that when you give
mhm.
your body a break from food for somewhere around 12 to 14 hours, it starts rejuvenating, right? I think they call it
Yeah.
autophagy. There are different processes that kick
Mm,
in where the stem cells start growing, repair starts. Like if you say
mm.
eat dinner at 7, by 5 hours later, which is midnight, the food is digested. But from midnight to say 10 a.m. the next day, the gut is repairing, the body's doing all sorts of things. And I could be wrong with the time, but it's somewhere around there. But
Mhm.
imagine if we did the same thing for our brains and our emotions
Mm.
by giving that fast from the phone or from,
Yeah, it's amazing.
yeah.
It really is. And one of the very first things, things that I heard about that gave me the idea in the first place to kick off like this weekend detox or whatever.
Mm,
One of my professors was telling me about this time that he had visited a Buddhist monastery and he had taken part in this weekend retreat where he shows up on Friday and once dinner is served on Friday, everyone goes silent and there's no
Vipassana.
communication until yeah, Vipassana, thank you, until Sunday night. He said that it was really weird, really uncomfortable. It was hard for him to hold back and not speak, but it got easier. And
Mm,
by Sunday, it was like effortless. And then he said that when they served dinner, he fully expected people to just burst like the dam, and the water's gushing forward. He said nobody was in a hurry to start talking again. It was just like easing into it. And the moment that people started talking, he said at least half the table just broke down into tears because it
mm,
was such a moving experience. And I'm like, I would love to experience an emotion like that just by talking. Like
mm.
that sounds pretty powerful.
It
I
does,
haven't
yeah.
done it yet, but yeah,
No,
it's
I'd love to try that as well. I don't know because the thought of it is much more terrifying than the reality.
mhm,
And in a lot of these situations, I think that's the case, right? You're like, what if
mhm.
you were saying I can't eat for
The
3 days, just drink only
uncertainty.
water? Yeah, uncertainty. Yeah.
Exactly. The discomfort of uncertainty is what prevents us from doing so many things.
But as a lot of the examples, I think the stories the anecdotes that you've told me and you shared with us today. I think that is such a key thing. And it's like we spoke about life skills. I think we can just wrap up with identifying a few of them, like learning with the ability to display vulnerability, or for instance, uncertainty, and um, what you can glean from uncertainty, right? Which is trust in your in yourself. Like when you're uncertain, who do you look to yourself? Or this idea of boredom, and I didn't get the word you mentioned, which people use for boredom, but
Mhm.
these are such things which go unnoticed, right? It's discounted even by educators or by certifiers or by seminar coaches, right? Then no one says, okay, today you've spent $200 on this online program. Just do nothing. No one tells you that because it's seen as inadequate, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't get a lot of people signing up at
Yeah,
all ever.
yeah,
But yeah, one other characteristic would be resilience,
hmm,
because if learning is going to be one of those characteristics, and you're going to constantly try to learn, well, then you are going to fail, and you're going to have to develop resilience so that you can bounce back from it and continue to learn. Because way too often somebody fails, somebody screws up, and then it's just like, okay, that's it. I give up. I'm
yeah,
moving on because I'm a failure. And resilience is kind of like, I see it as, it's kind of like our own way of self forgiveness, of giving ourselves room to screw up
mm,
and forgiving ourselves and moving on. And forgiveness is one of those characteristics too that
yeah,
I think our society is in very dangerously short supply of. And
yeah.
we could talk for another hour at least about cancel culture and forgiveness. And there's a lot to say on that too. But yeah, those all of these quote unquote soft skills, I mean, we have to start looking at them for what they are. And they are the foundation that we build everything else on. And if that foundation's shaky, then it's going to crumble. It's just a matter of time as to when.
And that's when you can make statements like AI is going to take over humanity because you've given it a chance to. Because otherwise, the essential skills
Mhm.
will prevent uh, the abuse, the misuse of a few to control the many, right?
Right, right, exactly. If it will give that a foothold to take over, and then before we know it, machine learning will pick up where we left off, and it will start developing empathy.
Yeah,
And then we'll be like, hey, we
yeah,
switched places here.
yeah. That would be nice, right? To have kind machines walking around with you.
Yeah,
Yeah. And you're this
like Big Hero 6.
you're devoid of emotions, but the machine's like, now's the time to smile. Now's the time to hold hands.
Are you doing okay today?
Yeah.
Do you need a hug?
Because by then we all want to be 150 with Botox in our faces and we want to have the longest lives without any emotion. And we're just like, okay, machine, tell me
Oh,
how I'm
yeah.
supposed to feel.
Yeah, I'm going to quote Ricky Bobby here and say, no, I think I could live to about 295, maybe 300, given medical science and the fact that I have a lot of money.
That's true.
Oh, I love that movie too much.
It's been such a lovely conversation, Josh. Thank you so much for sharing all your stories and your experiences with your students and uh, all the knowledge that you've gained by learning for yourself. And I really appreciate it. Thank you.
I appreciate the chance to do it because these conversations, they don't happen too often anymore. I mean,
No.
they happen with me in the mirror, but see, the guy in the mirror is kind of an asshole. So you're not, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. I think that's the best compliment I've got.
You're not an asshole.
Yeah, I think that's yeah. Sometimes that's a bigger compliment by saying you aren't something, and I think that's goes
Yeah.
again. That's another skill.
In the land of how's the I can't remember the quote. But anyway, when everyone else around you is an asshole, then
Yeah.
nice
No, when
guys
everyone
just
else is
generally seem great.
yeah, when everyone else is so like that's exactly what's relevant in today, right? When everyone is just kind of going with um this flow, which is not really a flow, but with going with the grain, by
Hmm.
not doing it, you're really making a much bigger statement
Yeah,
than you get credit for.
yeah. Moving against the zeitgeist.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think we definitely need to have this chat again in a few
Yeah.
weeks or a few months about forgiveness. And I think that's such an important thing because we're getting more and more,
Mm,
obstinate and accusations are flying. And yeah, so I'd love to talk to you
yeah.
soon and good luck with everything going forward. And
Yeah.
yeah, stay in touch.
Thank you. Yeah. Up next on the menu, compassion and forgiveness. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Coming up soon. Thanks, Josh. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you like what you heard, please do check out the other episodes on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. And I would much appreciate it if you could like the video, share it with people who you think might enjoy it, and of course, do subscribe to the channel because it will help me and the podcast grow and reach more people just like you. So thanks again. Appreciate it.